One storm is exiting the northeast, and a new storm is forming in the southwest and heading east and northeast. We're going to talk about both those systems. We'll get into the long range, try to figure out what, if any, snow is going to fall in the I 95 corridor on Wednesday. I don't know, might not be much. All of that and more coming up tonight. Where? But right here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. They've got salt, they've got sand, they've got 1 2 1 2. I know you can't hear me. I'm speaking now. You should be able to hear me. 1 2 3 4 5 5 4 3 2 1. I restarted it, and that's not working. Okay, it's good now. Okay, great. Oh God, I don't know what happened. Okay, honestly, I don't know what happened. I closed my software and opened it again, and it's fine. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. You see what happens when Joe's not here? Because when Joe's here, I have to check his audio. I have to set his shot. And I didn't have to do that tonight. It was just me. Okay? So now, here's what I'm going to do. Because I'm going to have to edit out all of that. And I am going to start the show over again. Okay? So just bear with me if you don't mind. Just bear with me. I'm going to start the show again, and then this way I can edit it out and fix it when we're all done. So give me a few seconds here, and here we go. One storm exiting the northeast, and a new storm is forming in the southwest, and that one will be headed east. We'll have all of that. We'll talk about the long range. That is all coming up on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, in southwest Suffolk County on Long Island, serving the entire New York, New Jersey, Connecticut tri-state area. And they've got mulch, they've got salt, they've got sand, and they've got everything you need to make sure you get through any winter storms that we have this winter. And we haven't had many yet. In some places haven't had any yet, but there's still plenty of time. 631-756-1125. They're getting ready, and so should you. The website is omnitruevalue.com. And a good evening to everyone. Welcome to tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show. I got to make a notation there. We had a little bit of audio difficulty at the start. I have absolutely no idea what happened, but you know what? I think we've got the problem solved now. So let's big hello to everybody on the chat board. I really appreciate your patience, and thank you, David Fuller, for the super chat hit so that I can have myself a cup of coffee to get over all of this. It's just crazy. And also thanks to David. Oh, did you hit it twice? I guess David Fuller hit it twice. No, Frank Gilroy also hitting super chat tonight. Thank you, Frank. Most appreciated for both of you. So that gives me a cigar, which will help me relax even better. So anyway, as we get underway in a new week, today being Monday the 23rd of January, it's been a month since we had that bitter, bitter cold air that came in right around Christmas. And of course, we know what happened right after Christmas when once that big storm that went to the lakes that brought in the cold air also broke down the blocking pattern. And after that, we spent 3.5 weeks with a Pacific fire hose that bombarded the West, particularly California, with a year's worth of rain in 15 days. And major league snows unheard of 200, 300 inches in the Sierra Nevadas. Now that pattern's broken down, and now we're kind of in this sort of transition pattern, which has not made things any really that much different in the eastern part of the United States, other than it's maybe made it a little bit closer to normal. But one thing I will tell you that as far as approaching this from the standpoint of a forecaster, when you're in a winter that where it snows, if we would have had several snow events going into this next weather system for Wednesday, and they were solid snow producers, you could look at the guidance that you get, you look at the models, and you would tend to want to favor the ones that are beefier, showing higher precip, more snow amounts. Oftentimes in snowy winters, it almost feels like snow begets snow. Well, the opposite is true when you have a winter like this, where it seems like you can't buy a snowflake. And every time you look at a weather pattern that looks like it's trying to set up that would be favorable, something comes along that makes it unfavorable. So you lean toward the side where you're going to wind up getting less. And this is how I'm approaching Wednesday. There were model runs today, earlier in the day, that really beefed up the amounts, showing what could have been for some areas, maybe a significant front end thump of snow, and then some of the other models backed away from it. And this is what I'm doing. I'm just basically going to stay on the low side of things. You're going to have to prove it to me. And I think tomorrow the proof will be put down by the models at least, where you can feel confident enough that, if you have to go up, you go up. But if you're sitting here and you're looking at some of these maps and you're saying that, oh my, this model's putting 8 inches here and 6 inches there, you can bet that it's probably not going to happen. And even today, where in areas north and west of the big cities where there was a change over to snow, yeah, some places did get a coating to a few inches, some places more toward the coating, and some places not at all. But they were well under what the guidance was showing in terms of snow amounts. So you have to remember that when you talk about the next weather system that's coming up. That there is a higher probability that the snow amounts that are being forecasted by weather models are going to come in far less than what's being indicated, at least for the areas, let's say in the I-95 corridor. That's how it's been so far this winter. And until we get into a more favorable pattern, until we get into a situation where we actually see an event play out and how much we get out of it, so we could use that as a forecast tool for the next time around. You're gonna have to really convince me that this is not going to be anything more than a coating to maybe as much as a couple of inches as you go further inland, and then of course as you go further north, say up north of Route 84, that's a whole different story, because they've been getting more snow and some snow chances this winter. So you bear that in mind. If you're looking at these model guidance, the model guidance out there, and you're looking at a snow map that's got some big numbers, at the very least, you should look at them with skepticism. And if you really want to kind of plan something from it, I would immediately just take the numbers and cut them by 50%, because that to me makes the most sense. So on that note, why don't we get going? And I'll try and come back with regard to see you folks on the chat board, because I can't see the chat going on at the same time. I'm going to move my shot tomorrow and go back into my other room where I've got double monitors, and this way I can monitor the chat board and do everything else all at the same time. So let's start off with. I want to start off with the latest hazards map, because that at least will tell us, where all the watches and warnings are and so on. So let me get myself out of here, make myself small, move Omni to the side. I'll switch this over to the winter storm map. Here we go, and let's get me. I'm going to try, maybe I'll just leave myself up in the upper corner. How's that? Put myself in a little box in the upper corner. And so there you have it. So this is what's left of the warnings and advisories that are up, and they're mainly in northeastern Connecticut, in eastern Massachusetts, and northern Rhode Island, where we have winter weather advisories. And in the pink, we still have winter storm warnings for other counties in Massachusetts, except for the westernmost counties, southern half of New Hampshire, and on up through Maine. Everybody else is out of it. There's also some winter weather advisories up in north central New York, and those are going to run their course before too long. But one thing going on today, it was all aloft with regards to the colder air that was coming in. The low levels were not really all that cold. You really had to go pretty far up into the Hudson Valley. And here we are at 7:51 Eastern Time, and we still have temperatures that are hovering in the upper 20s and low 30s as you go well inland. And especially where it's snowing, temperatures are in the upper 20s to around 30. Where it's no longer precipitating, I noticed that, for example, White Plains today was snowing all afternoon. It's finally stopped, but the temperature really never got below 35. And we did see a changeover to snow over Long Island. Here, too, temperatures didn't get much below 36, 37. In fact, Farmingdale is still 37, for example. And what Gabrisky Airport is still light rain there and 36. So it just kind of shows you that you needed to have at least a little bit more low-level cold air. When you have a situation like this, the only way that you could wind up with accumulating snows is if you get intensity. You have to get moderate to heavy snow to fall because that helps to cool the column and the bottom of the atmosphere to get it down to the freezing mark. And then you would see accumulating snows even on road surfaces in situations like that. It's not the warm ground, it's not the sun angle, it's the intensity of the snow that's falling that really drives accumulations. Even in the dead of winter when you have a low sun angle, which we actually still do, but still, if you don't have intensity, you're not going to really be able to do very much with these types of storms where you only have a minimal amount of cold air. So as the map resets, I want to just kind of move it over so we can take a look at what's going on elsewhere with respect to this next storm system. And we have winter storm watches up for western Ohio, a few counties in southeastern Michigan. It is just outside the Detroit area. We also have them across a good chunk of the state of Indiana into south central Illinois, and then they turn into warnings in southwestern Illinois, much of southern Missouri, northwestern Arkansas. It cuts right across the state of Oklahoma with winter storm warnings, and then going back into northwestern Texas and in eastern New Mexico. And they're going to see their fair share of snow as this gets underway. We've got winter weather advisories that are still arcing back into Arizona. Most of the temperatures here are right now in the 30s and 40s. It won't be too long that once this storm gets underway, we're going to see those temperatures drop. And of course, further south, where we have issues with regards to severe weather across parts of the Gulf states. And you're seeing in the yellow here, I'm sorry, in the brown, wind advisories that are up. And in fact, let me just switch over to the regular Weather Service homepage because that's an easier thing for me to see and to figure out. So we've got high wind warnings put up for the Gulf Coast. And there again, there's also going to be severe weather issues tomorrow where we have an enhanced risk of severe weather indicated by the Storm Prediction Center. And as we take a look at that, there's no severe for the rest of today and tonight, but tomorrow we have enhanced risk over a fairly large area along the coast from the Florida Panhandle to southeast Louisiana. That takes a little bit of a jump, and the middle area of the Texas coastal bend under an enhanced risk. And that comes, by the way, with a 10% tornado risk, which is pretty high. Up into the marginal risk zone, we have a 2% tornado risk, and you see that going to be playing out tomorrow as this next storm develops. And then on Wednesday into Thursday, we have a marginal risk from southeast Virginia down to northwestern Florida and most of the Florida Panhandle. I would not be surprised if we wind up adding a slight risk area to this before it is all said and done. So just give me a moment here, folks. I'm going to check to see if something has gone wrong. I'm seeing messages here. Okay, so for those of you who are trying to um, uh, get on the chat board, okay, so you have to go to YouTube, okay, to do that. All right, I know a few of you have mentioned this to me. You have to go to YouTube to watch the show and join the chat. So you can't do it from my subscription platform directly, but the links are there. You can watch the show, but if you want to participate in it, you have to go to YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube channel with your Gmail account, and then you can get on the chat. That's how it works, because I think some of you are not exactly familiar with how that works. So anyway, I just wanted to check to see that was what was going on, and not the fact that there's another technical issue. So let's get back to weather, and let's go to the satellite loop. And here we go. Get me out of here. So there's a satellite loop tonight, and you're seeing the clouds, a lot of clouds in the eastern part of the United States. Still waiting. The actual storm center has gone well to the east now of Cape Cod. What we have is the upper trough that is swinging through. So we really can't get the clouds out of the way until this whole thing moves out, which it will do overnight and into the first part of tomorrow. But improvement is going to be very, very slow. And in the meantime, in the southwest, you can see the clouds gathering, and you can also see the rotation that is going on back in southern, near the Arizona-New Mexico border in the southern part of both those states. That is the energy that is getting kicked eastward that will become the next storm system for Tuesday night and on into Wednesday. And on the radar this evening, the last of the precipitation, snow in southeastern New England, except rain right near the coast and rain over. That is going out slowly but surely. Even in coastal Maine, we're seeing that drop. There's some snow up in northern Michigan with a weather front that is moving southeast, and you start to see you're seeing the snow also in Arizona and New Mexico from that energy that's going to be moving east into Texas and into the areas that have the winter storm warning. And we've got some snow up in northern Montana. By the way, speaking of snow, this morning I woke up to a radar here in northeast Georgia that looked like this. It was 33 degrees. I heard this noise outside, and the next thing I knew, it was snowing here, and we had a nice, beautiful coating of snow. It's the fifth time it has snowed here this winter, and temperatures today didn't get above 35. I haven't been paying close attention to the weather down here, but you get a lot of mountain effect, particularly in a situation like this when you have a storm off in the east and off the east coast. Oftentimes, with the northerly wind aloft, you get snow that develops in the mountains of western North Carolina and down into northern Georgia, and that's exactly what I saw today. So let's move on to WPC, the liquid precip amounts for the next 7 days. The storm system that we're seeing for Wednesday is dominating most of the precipitation that you're seeing here being indicated by WPC. So we've got another situation where it's going to be 3/4 of an inch to an inch of liquid in coastal areas, also about a half to 3/4 of an inch as you go inland, where it could be more snow than anything else, particularly up in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. Along the Gulf Coast, very active. We're talking an inch and a half plus from southern Georgia back to South Texas, and a large area of 2 to 3 inches for southeast Texas and much of Louisiana to southern Mississippi. I think that severe weather tomorrow is going to play out to most of that. Not too much happening, though, in the western half of the United States. The northern Rockies, yes, some higher amounts of an inch or more of liquid in some places there. And, of course, that'll be snow. In the west, it's mostly on the light side from Southern California all the way up to Washington State. Amounts generally under a tenth of an inch in most areas, with a few exceptions. But most of the areas are going to see light precip, which probably means that we're talking about a system here and a system there, and much of the time it's going to be dry. Now, the probabilities of at least 2 inches as we take a look, and this should be pretty much a clean number now, as we've taken out what's going on today. And you can see in the Northeast, and we haven't had a map like this in a while. We had it to an extent with this previous system. This one's a little more extensive, where we've got a fairly large area. Anything in the red colors is 80% or higher. The dark red is 95 to 100% probability of at least two. The darkest blue is 40%, and that lies just north and west of New York City and cuts right across Boston. It's a fair distance north of Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. So basically, it's looking at the areas from, say, central New Jersey northward as far as whether there's going to be any kind of a burst of snow. But the 50% line goes from about Boston to, I would say, somewhere halfway between White Plains and Poughkeepsie, across northern New Jersey, down to, let's say, northern Hunterdon County. south and west of there, west of Lancaster to about Harrisburg, and then continuing westward into western Maryland and northern West Virginia. We're also seeing high probabilities of at least two back through Indiana, northwest Ohio, west central Illinois, east central Illinois, I should say, southern Missouri, northwest Texas into New Mexico. And if we put up the higher amount, I'm going to put up four. Okay, so the probabilities for at least four, and still show up in pretty much the same areas. And you could see where in upstate New York, we're talking north of I-90, in Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, also showing 80% or higher probability for at least four. And if we pop up the 8-inch probability, you see there it's in the Adirondacks, parts of Vermont, much of New Hampshire at 40 or 50% probability for at least 8, and much of Maine is at a 50 to 80% probability of at least 8 inches. And in the long range, that carries over for Thursday into Friday up in northern Maine, where we're seeing probabilities here of 30 to 50 in the green and 50 to 70 in the dark blue of at least a few inches, 2 or 3 inches, to at least 2 or 3 additional inches of snow, and not too much else pops up in the rest of the long range period that takes us through Friday into Saturday. I'll just widen this out so you can see the whole country. It's all up in the northern Rockies. Saturday into Sunday, it's kind of scattered in the northern Rockies. Not much snow falling on Saturday into Sunday, and Sunday into Monday with a bit of a cold front coming in. We're seeing some 10 to 30% probabilities of a few inches in Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, the lower peninsula of Michigan, northwest PA, southwest New York, and north central New York. Higher probabilities on the Canada side, including Toronto, and going up not too far from Montreal. So let's look at where we're going with all of this weather-wise, and I want to start with the NAM model tonight, and I'm going to go back to the 12Z run, okay? Because this is the run that really kind of beefed things up today, and the snow lovers were just seeing some of the numbers that were being produced out of that, including a half a foot in New York City. And I'm sure they were jumping for joy, only to have the European and then the 18Z run of the models taken away. So our system off the East Coast, and there it is. This was earlier this afternoon, 2 o'clock over Nova Scotia, where the low is. And the precip finally pulling out because the upper trough is kind of stretching that precip column from northeast to southwest. So now it pulls away. We see some improvement other than some lake effect. Now, there is a weak front that's coming through on Tuesday. You'll hardly notice it. It kind of gets lost here during the day. But what that does is that it actually helps to funnel down just slightly colder air for Tuesday night into Wednesday, which really is ultimately important to what's coming up from the southwest. And you see the low that's coming out of the southwest, and the dark blue snows there in Texas and Oklahoma, sweeping up into Missouri, and eventually into Illinois and Indiana. So here we are Wednesday morning. The low is in southernmost Illinois. There is a cold front that extends from there. You see a line of thunderstorms, showers and thunderstorms moving eastward. The severe weather threat for tomorrow, I'll just back it up, and you see the model really does blossom out some very strong thunderstorms late in the day Tuesday in East Texas, and rips them across Louisiana Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. Now, this is all happening, by the way, because of the fact that we have a deepening low and a fairly aggressive upper air shortwave. So these thunderstorms are going to hold together tomorrow night. They may actually peak and reach their peak intensity during the overnight period rather than during the daytime. They'll start to weaken a little bit, but you'll still have a line moving fairly quickly eastward on Wednesday across the southern states. Meanwhile, the snow by Wednesday morning, there's a little arc there into western PA. This is at 10 o'clock in the morning, that arc moves eastward. Now, before I go to the next map, I just want you to remember that always said that those of you who live in the coastal areas, particularly southern New England, New York, New Jersey, and so on. If it starts snowing in upstate New York and Vermont before it starts snowing uh, where you are, that tells you that you're taking a storm is tracking well to your west. When it starts snowing in Virginia, in Maryland, and Delaware first, that tells you that you're seeing a storm that's taking more of a coastal track. And here is the issue here. If you look at how this model on the 18Z run, that arc that breaks out ahead, there's like a warm front. It now on the models, it sets up across eastern Connecticut, back to western Massachusetts and through upstate New York. There's very little going on from the lower Hudson Valley down into Delaware and eastern Pennsylvania. You have to go into central and western PA, you start to see the blues again, and then suddenly between 1 and 7 o'clock, you start to see some snow blossoming out into northern New Jersey, eastern PA, but you lose all of all of this winds up developing across upstate New York and New England. So this is causing me to really be very cautious because on the 12Z run, as we take a look, that arc actually set up the southern edge of that was in central New Jersey. And all the dark blues were over Long Island, northern New Jersey, and the lower Hudson Valley. So you got about a 3 to 6 hour period of fairly solid snow here before it ultimately changes over to rain tomorrow night. So if the new runs are correct, you're going to lose that, and you may not get much of anything along the coast. Maybe in northwest New Jersey, maybe in the Hudson Valley north of 84, but on the coast, it could wind up being snowless again. So let's see if we're at this point now where models are just sort of vacillating back and forth. But I would just remind you what I said earlier, which is this is a winter where it doesn't want to snow in the I-95 corridor. So if that's the case, um, you can, and if you're a betting person, you're going to want to put your money on the fact that it's not going to happen. But meanwhile, we shouldn't ignore the fact that we're going to see some sizable snows back across the upper Ohio Valley and in the lower Great Lakes. And in fact, when we look at the snowfall forecast map, this is what we're going to wind up with. And it looks like it could be substantial up in the Adirondacks of a foot plus, substantial for much of New Hampshire, into Maine, where we're talking about a fairly large area of a foot plus. And then you see the southern edge gets cut off in southeastern New England. Western Long Island, north and west, a coating to an inch. Maybe when you get up to northern New Jersey, you start to look at amounts of maybe a couple of inches. So they've got fours printed out over there. I suppose it's possible, but I would again lean against that. And then as we go west, it's a general 5 to 8 inch snowfall that is set to fall in those areas that have the winter storm watches up and the winter storm warnings. And you see further south down in southern Missouri, we're talking about 8 inches plus. And in Oklahoma, it's 4 to 6. And in North Texas, it's generally 4, 5, 6 inches there and back into New Mexico. So if I'm being that I'm occasionally a betting person, I'm going to bet that we're going to see that boundary set up further north, and that there'll be little snow at the for the coast. Uh, that's what I'm thinking now. I didn't change my forecast, which was basically to a coating to maybe an inch along the coast and several inches possible well inland for eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, and of course higher amounts as you get into northeast PA and into the Catskills. It could certainly be every bit of 6 plus there. But you folks right at the I-95 corridor, you better hope that the model starts to go back a little further south. One of the keys to look for will be tomorrow night, is into Wednesday morning. There should be just enough cold air to take temperatures down into the 20s. So that air has to be a little bit more important to force the boundary here to set up a little bit further to the south. We get the change to rain, and you'll notice this is at 10 p.m. It's mostly done by by 2 or 3 a.m. The bulk of the rain is done from New York City south and west. Still raining hard though in southeastern New England, but even here by 7 a.m. it's almost over with. The rain up in Maine, leftover snows in upstate New York, some lake effect going on back in Pennsylvania and Ohio, and it's Indiana and Illinois, and then the low pulls away up to the northeast. So that kind of, to me, sums up the short range. Just a look at what's going on, at least in the upper air, to give you an idea here. The trough, the short wave, just rolling it back. You got this wrapped up cutoff low. We saw the rotation. Okay, we saw the rotation on the satellite loop in Arizona and New Mexico, and that holds together, but it gets ejected way too far to the left. There's too much ridging here. Right here in the eastern part of the United States, off the East Coast, right all through here, there's a ridge that is pushed up, and the trough lifts up way to the west. So when they're going like this, you're going to take a surface low, you're going to take a primary up the west side of the Appalachians. You would have needed a much flatter ridge in the east to get this thing to be further east, rather than lift up to the lakes that it would lift it up, say, into West Virginia and up into upstate New York, perhaps. It would have prolonged the frozen precipitation for the coastal areas. So that goes out, and then there's just some residual troughing after that. Now, interestingly enough, I'm going to switch over to the GFS, and we're going to go to the upper air, because I know a lot of you saw today's late run GFS, which was, nothing short of hilarious considering the kind of winter it's been, because it implies that we're going to go into something completely the opposite. And I would just be very careful about thinking that this conclusion is going to be the right one. I do say that it's probably of the last several days where the runs of the long range for winter weather lovers was something that I would consider terrible. They weren't exactly great, but they were certainly not as anti-winter as what we've been seeing, and certainly no Pacific fire hose. But this particular run of the GFS was very interesting to me. It does open up the spigots of cold air to come into the United States, and it's got a very, very broad look to the things. You've got this vortex that sets up in southern Hudson's Bay. So you got basically almost like a bowl, what we used to call the broad bowl. And you, in a situation like this, you look to see if there's little short waves that move along that could set up overrunning events. And we do see a short wave here that's swinging around in the long range down into Texas and across the Gulf states and eventually up the East Coast as the whole trough shifts eastward. This is a much colder look to things that the model is showing in the long range period, and it's actually in the not so long range that it starts. This actually starts around day 5, day 6 to set up for this. Now, I'm going to guarantee you that we're going to see changes as we look at further runs, but this is a bit. It's certainly much more of a wintry look to carry us into the month of February if this winds up verifying. Now, I will tell you this, because this definitely is not going to be there on the next run. It was on the models a few runs before. Remember the kind of winter we're having, folks, okay? Just bear that in mind. And here's our storm that moves away. We've got a cold front that's coming down. While there is some fairly cold air that moves into the northern plains and northern lakes, the problem is that you still have some ridging along the southeast coast, so that cold air doesn't get into the east. We have to get one more front through, and that comes sometime on Sunday. And there's a low that develops, a wave on that front, which stays or like kind of clips the coast. There's not a whole lot of cold air in yet. You have to wait for that low to go by. Then you start to see the colder high begin to press in, and the model sets up, starting a week from tomorrow, begins to set up what looks like a very broad overrunning pattern from southern New England all the way down into the central Gulf states. Again, you hardly ever see something like this where it's got snow for basically this is February 1st, which is not that far away. This is February 1st. This is February 2nd, the 3rd, and then it's gone after that. So you've got a model run that says that it's going to snow or snow and ice or something like that for the Mid-Atlantic and South Atlantic states, and then also for the Northeast for at least 72 hours straight. When does that ever happen? Okay, it doesn't. So expect this to change, and it does have. I mean, it gets very cold if this is correct. I mean, it gets very cold here around February 3rd. I mean, we would be talking temperatures running 15, 20 degrees below average if this is the case, with this kind of cold high for everybody in the eastern half of the United States. Uh, Checking out the anomalies on this, I mean, you could look at that. I mean, this is all below average. Everybody east of the Rockies is not just below average, but significantly below average. Those colors there are 15 to 20 degrees or more below average. Some places even 25 degrees below average. I'm telling you right now, I would be very surprised if if this becomes something that you begin to see if this becomes something that you begin to consistently see on the model runs. I think it's going to change. I don't think, it may not radically change. Maybe it will. Maybe it will radically change. I don't know. But again, it's forever giving you something to hope for, and then it's forever taking it away from you. So just remember that. This has not been a winter. If this were a winter where we were getting winter weather on a regular basis and only getting occasionally interrupted by systems going to the west or brief warm-ups, we'd be having a different conversation along those lines. But it's just not I mean, I don't know. And I looked at that today and my jaw sort of dropped. But again, we're in prove it to me mode. You're going to have to prove it to me that is what reality is going to be in the next couple of weeks. And by the way, it does appear now that the polar vortex is not going to split, at least not yet. So if you're looking for what's going on in the stratosphere to help the pattern along through the month of February into March, and you're thinking that the polar vortex splitting is going to be the savior here, I would tell you that it doesn't look too hopeful based on what was being shown today. Jason Kaplan hitting super chat tonight. Thank you very much. Appreciated. Ken Musillo, thank you, Ken, for hitting super chat tonight. Josh hits super chat tonight. He says, 45 miles north of Albany, we had around 8 inches of snow on a 4-inch snow forecast. When you have a moment later, can you explain what happened? Sure. And of course, the earlier super chat hits from Frank Gilroy and David Fuller. Thank you again. So, Josh, let's take a look and see what transpired today. And I think it. Hold on, just let me get to my maps here, and let's go to. All right, here we go. When Joe is here, he can talk while I have to do all the switching. And then, of course, the audio problem at the beginning of the show has really kind of thrown me off and thrown me a curveball. So let's take a look and see what happened with regards to today. And the first thing I would say is if we go back on the satellite, I'm going to add a bunch of frames here. Let's go back. It's going to take a little while to load all these frames up. I'm going to take the hazards map off. Oh, I already did, so that's good. So that'll help speed things up a little bit. But this system, for one thing, it got a little bit more. The lead system going out really kind of played according to plan, but the models underestimated two things that happened. Was that the models underestimated what was the amount of precipitation that was going to develop through upstate New York and into New England, central and into central New England today, particularly north of I-90. The upper trough is still hasn't cleared the northeast yet, and I think that was where you wound up getting into a bit of a jackpot zone. You got the moisture from the developing lead low, which probably performed in line, and then the upper trough outperformed as it moved to the east. And you can see it here on the satellite. It's still fairly well defined with a lot of clouds and a lot of moisture that is running through the northeast. And when we just kind of look at this from the standpoint of what was happening in the upper air, the shortwave troughs, I'll go back 72 hours, and you can see here's Fridays. So now we went through the weekend. And here comes the energy for the system that played through tonight and today. Yeah, this wrapped up upper, it's not quite wrapped up, but I mean, there's one contour cutoff low there sitting in northern Ohio, northern Indiana. Let me just put my paint box up. Now it becomes an open low. This feature here wound up being stronger than modeled as it moved through, and actually still kind of had probably had a little bit of a closed low in there that moved right across upstate New York. So when you use a rule that I think works out pretty well when you look at these upper air troughs as they go by, usually the heaviest snow is going to fall on a track that's north and west of that where the upper low is by about anywhere from say 30 to 100 miles. So you had the track of the upper low just probably go just to your south, so you were right in that zone. And that feature actually weakens and then starts to strengthen again when it moves, it reforms and closes off in the Gulf of Maine tonight, or it has closed off in the Gulf of Maine tonight, was forecast to at 7 o'clock. So you caught a system that initially was starting to weaken, and then from this morning through the daytime, that upper feature actually started to strengthen. So that's the other thing I would say. The upper trough was in a strengthening mode. When you have something like that that's in the mode of strengthening, you're going to outperform whatever is being forecast by the models. If it were weakening, you probably would have gotten in line or less than what was being advertised. So I hope that answers your question. And everybody should feel free anytime. I don't always get to scour the chat board. As I said, tomorrow will be different because I'll be in the other, in my other room. And the chairman, Scott Briller, hitting super chat tonight, sending good wishes for Mother Briller. Yes, absolutely more good wishes for Mother Briller and for you, because we want you to both get better. And to see you back on the chat board on a regular basis, hopefully soon. And Izzy D. Hitting super chat tonight as he sits in coastal New Jersey with rain, 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 rain. I get it. Yeah, I know, Izzy. You know what? You got to get the pattern. Obviously the pattern is not there for you. The type of winter we're having is not there for you. So you may just have to wait for that one opportunity and pray that the afternoon late GFS run is right, because that's something that you could probably wind up doing fairly well with if it were to verify for later next week. Excuse me, do not, like as I said, do not hold your breath on that occurring. So anyway, I'm just going to run through the chat real quick. I hope those of you who've been trying to get on the chat board but can't seem to figure it out, you got to go to the YouTube link that I put up every day all over the place. Just click on that link and subscribe to the YouTube channel and create a handle so that you can post, and then you can participate on the chat. So there you have it. All right. Nice crowd tonight. Thanks everybody for being here. 116 likes, and I did it all by myself. So I'm sorry about those difficulties for the first 8 minutes. But you know what? Stuff happens. And thankfully it was something easy to fix. All I had to do was turn the software on and turn off and turn it back on again. I never, didn't occur to me that because we've gone I don't know how many days that I haven't had any kind of software glitches, and suddenly there is one. I already so I do not put up my snow forecast map until the night before. It's on my subscription site on Patreon, patreon.com/meteorologist Joe Cioffi. So my subscribers get it first, and then tomorrow night I'll probably put up the final call. That's how I operate. Okay, so everybody have a great night, and thanks for being here. We'll see you tomorrow, and hopefully no technical glitches. Night, everybody.